Hello, this is Dr. Kurt Stahora from Niagara University. I'm a professor within the College of Hospitality and Tourism Management. I'm also the NGTI, Niagara Global Tourism Institute Scholar and Director of Research. What you're about to see is the second iteration of our quarterly updates, where we, along with our partners from Europe and Asia, talk about the trends in tourism. Obviously, we're going to be discussing COVID and its effects on trends. The two people that you'll be also seeing on this video is number one, Dr. Martine Ferry, and she's at the Institut de Paul Bocuse in Lyon, France. And the second scholar you'll see is Dr. Justin Pang, and he works for RMIT, which is an Australian institution, although he teaches in their campus in Vietnam, and he's originally from Singapore, so he's a wonderful representative for Asia with each of those perspectives. We hope you enjoy this tourism short, and we look forward to having you continue your viewership, and we'll continue to do this throughout the year. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Justin Matthew Pang. I'm a lecturer here at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology University, based in Hanoi. I will be going through some of the occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR of some of the key gateway cities here in Asia. So I'll be showing you some slides on the respective countries and giving you my insights. All right, now I'll go through some of the occupancy here in Asia, and I'll be talking a bit about Hong Kong, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, and Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. So if you look at the chart that we have here, Hong Kong is in blue, Hanoi is in brown, Ho Chi Minh City in grey, Singapore in yellow, and Kuala Lumpur in green. So we're going to do a quick comparison between what we did last year versus what we have this year. As you can see from the chart here, January was a terrible time for last year's occupancy. That was the time when occupancy dropped very quickly due to COVID. If you look at this year, 2021, occupancy has actually picked up. Why this is so is generally because the countries here have managed COVID pretty well, and because of Chinese New Year, a lot of the occupancies have picked up due to staycations. And in Singapore's sense, there is the staycation package offered by the government. If you look at Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh City, generally for Tet holidays, their occupancy do not go up because the Vietnamese will not go to the hotels, but they'll celebrate at home. And for KL basically has controlled their MCO and their virus. That's why occupancy has gone up. Now I'll go into this slide here and we'll talk a bit about the average daily rates. These are all featured in US dollars. As you can see in last year, the rates were very quickly dropped for certain countries, for example, in Hong Kong and in Singapore, especially during the month of February. That was the period of time when COVID came to these countries. And due to the lack of occupancy, a lot of the hotels dropped their rates, hoping to get better occupancy. If you look at Vietnam, as I mentioned already, there is no COVID in Vietnam. They did not sustain a lot of impact from the COVID, so their rates actually stayed the same for last year. And for this year, if you're looking at Singapore, Singapore has done very well to control its virus infection. So Singapore is able to increase its rates. And if you look at Vietnam for this year as well, you can see that they have also retained their rates because they have not been affected by COVID, and they are getting a lot of business from domestic travel. I'll go through my final slide on RevPAR, and RevPAR is a summary of both occupancy and revenue. Once again, as you can see, the dotted lines, these countries have suffered tremendously in occupancy. That's why RevPAR has gone pretty much down for almost all the cities here. In 2021, you can see that Singapore has picked up because occupancy has gone up slightly more, but they are able to get a bit more revenue. Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur has done well as well. That's why it's gone up. If you look at Hong Kong, occupancy RevPAR is still not fantastic due to lower occupancy, and the cities of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City has also gone up a bit. So that's my conclusion for the occupancy, uh, ADR, and RevPAR. Thank you.
Hello, this is Dr. Kurt Stahora, and I'm here to share our portion of our international update on the COVID trends that are happening throughout the country and throughout the world, and actually throughout North America. Normally we talk about occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR, and glean from that data things that would benefit you. I think for the purposes of our presentation today, occupancy speaks volumes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Niagara Falls, USA, here on the New York side, to Niagara Falls, Canada. In January last year, 2020, the United States occupancy rate here in the city was 35%, which was typical going back many, many years. That's about where we would expect to be. This year, 2021, we're at about 24%, which under the circumstances is not horrific. And I think we can talk about some of the explanations for that moving forward, and we'll do so. In Canada, however, typical year, last year, 2020, 40%. Once again, not so bad and fairly typical. This year, COVID year, it's a staggering 7.8%. So clearly, COVID has taken its toll on Canada. In February last year in the United States, Niagara Falls, New York, we had a 37% occupancy rate. So it's trending upwards ever so slightly, which is to be expected, and that is roughly what the historical data would suggest, and that's where we would expect to be this year under normal circumstances. 2021 on this side, this year, 26.5%. So once again, all things considered, we're doing reasonably well. Canada in February of last year was at 43%. Similarly, trending upwards from January. This year, however, under COVID circumstances and given the unique policies and procedures implemented by Canada, which were very conservative, they're at 9.9%. Finally, in March of last year, here in the United States, which is when COVID was starting to affect people's travel patterns, and the policies and procedures implemented by the government was suggesting that people not travel, at about the halfway point in March, we were at 30.5%. So as opposed to going up, as would be expected, we took a little bit of a dip. This year, under COVID protocols, we're at 29.7%. Well, not bad under the circumstances. Canada, Niagara Falls, Canada, last year at this time was at 35%. Once again, half of the month being affected by COVID protocols. But this year, in March, under COVID protocols, they're at 12.3%. Clearly, COVID has had an effect on occupancy and had an effect on the industry as a whole.
And welcome back to our panelists for a quick Q&A session today. I'd like to once again welcome Justin Pang, Martine Ferry, Pat Whalen, and Kurt Stahora for our discussion today. So I guess we're going to jump right into the questions here. I know COVID-19 and the pandemic has been on the top of everyone's minds and policies and in our industry. So let's kick it off. Now, as we sit here, we each represent unique parts of the world. What are the existing COVID protocol policies in your region? And Justin, I'll kick us off with you.
Okay, sure. If you look at Asia, it's very difficult to actually say that one blanket policy. Asia has got many countries. I mean, we've got countries which are developed and some countries which are developing, and they don't really have a basic or proper protocol. So it's very hard to say about a certain standard. Each of the different countries have different COVID situations right now. Some have a major problem trying to control it. Some are pretty much cleared of it. But of late, there has been a spike in COVID in Asia. There's this increase in India right now. I mean, we have got so many deaths in India right now, and it's about 400,000 deaths per day. There's been a spike in Singapore as well, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam. So I think right now in Asia, the protocols will definitely be increased and things will be a bit more stringent within each country.
All right. How are things in North America, Canada, and U.S., Pat and Kurt?
Well, we just had the Can-Am Border Trade Alliance, and a lot of these issues were discussed in detail. So I'm going to defer to Pat because he was in the midst of the conversations that were taking place.
Thanks, Kurt. We did have the Canadian American Border Trade Alliance spring conference yesterday and the day before, so this is top of mind for me. I was the MC. I did it from this chair, actually. And we had government officials from both the United States and Canada on, and a large audience that asked questions. So we spent 2 days discussing the Canada-US border. And there's quite a bit of difference between the United States and Canada. Canada still is struggling with vaccinating its population. We learned yesterday that only 3% of the Canadian population at this time has been fully vaccinated. Their policy right now is to try to get one of the shots in arms, and it could be up to 4 months before they get the second shot. So this is a concern. Meanwhile, in the United States, most people I know have been vaccinated. The people that I know that are not vaccinated really are not vaccinated because they've chosen not to be vaccinated. So we have plenty of vaccination. And in Canada, especially in Ontario and in Alberta, the provinces of Alberta and Ontario, they're experiencing a third wave right now, and the spike is quite severe. So the political dynamics are such that the border remains closed. We're 7 blocks from the border. I'm headed there right after this recording to have a press conference with our United States Senator about developing a plan to open the border. There's a lot of pressure to develop a plan, a little less pressure to open the border, but a lot of us are concerned that there isn't a plan. What will be required? What metrics have to be met in order for the border to be reopened, and then what will the governments require? Canada right now has been leaning toward proof of a negative test, while the United States is leaning toward proof of vaccination. And if it's two different things, it's going to be difficult to travel over and back. And as I said, for us, we're 7 blocks from the border. We're in Niagara Falls, New York, so this is a really tourism hotbed right here. And a lot of people go across and come back sometimes more than one time in a day. But if there's going to be different requirements to move back and forth, that's going to be problematic. So we're trying to pressure the governments and actually create a sense of urgency within the 2 federal governments to actually develop a plan so that when the time is right and we can reopen the border, we can do so at that time and not start developing a plan at that time. We'd like to have a plan in place.
All right. And Martine, how are things in Europe, in the Europe region?
Okay, so where I am at the moment in France, we are no longer under lockdown, but we still have a curfew starting at 7 p.m., which is really early. Regarding EU, on May 3rd, the European Commission has recommended to lift the restriction to non-essential travel to the EU. So this is a very good news. Because the rollout of the vaccination campaigns indicate that there is room to ease travel. So we will have what we call a digital green certificate, It will be put in place by the end of June. And with that certificate, we could travel around EU without any quarantine. And this certificate will indicate that we are been vaccinated, or that we have had COVID earlier, or several negative PCR tests, for instance. So it's going to be a back to normal, to our magic passport that we used to have in the EU.
So you mentioned that protocol. So it actually involves a number of other things. So it's actually whether they've gotten a shot, whether they've gotten COVID, whether they've gotten a PCR test. How is that all organized? Is it going to be just a document? Is it digital? How is that being regulated and organized for the, I would say, the millions of travelers going across the EU?
Okay, so as I mentioned, there is a recommendation to put in place, and it has been voted by the EU on May 3rd. It is a digital green certificate. You will have it on your phone. You can have a paper version that will allow you to travel within EU. So that's without any other protocols, such as quarantine, for instance. So we will be back to normal. So that's very good news for European people, as we used to travel as much as we wanted and wherever we wanted within the Schengen area. So that's a very good news. Of course, protocols won't be the same when it comes to traveling to the UK, because it is a little bit different. So the EU are now speaking with the UK in order to determine these new protocols.
But that's definitely a fantastic advancement in moving things forward with traveling again. I know here in the United States, we Pat mentioned talking about cross-border travel, and then when you get into different regulations between the 50 states, it gets even more complicated. So it's fantastic that you guys have really, hopefully, are setting a benchmark for the advancement of travel. Moving on to our next question, here in the United States, especially in our region, Niagara Falls, we are starting to hit the tourism, you can call it the high season for our area. So given the existing policies in your regions that you're aware of, and also the current situations, how is your travel season looking like for this upcoming quarter?
Well, I'll start off first. I think initially in Asia, there have been some travel bubbles that certain countries have tried to establish. Like Singapore was trying to establish a travel bubble with Hong Kong, and Vietnam was looking at establishing some travel corridors with Japan and with Korea and with Taiwan. But currently, the situation right now with the spike in COVID and the issue also with many countries having their citizens not being vaccinated has set things back. I think first thing I'll talk about is the vaccination policy here in Asia, because of the many countries that we have, and trust me, it's a lot more difficult than the 50 states in the US, because in Asia we've got so many countries here, and they are all at different states of development. Singapore has a very concerted approach. They have been vaccinating people from the oldest person right down to the youngest people. So they are somewhat at the age group of the 35 to 40s right now. And I know that Hong Kong also has a vaccination program, but people are a bit skeptical because after what has happened with the Hong Kong riots, there's some loss of confidence in the government. I'll say that. So even though they have a vaccination program, it's not entirely acceptable by everybody. But right now, as I said, there's this huge spike in the coronavirus and its mutation, and it's essentially come from India. So a lot of countries actually have put in travel restrictions. They're not accepting people from India, and they also they don't want travelers coming from certain affected countries. So right now, I'll say that the travel season for Asia will definitely be a slump, where as countries start to close off their economies and to further ban traveling.
Given the spikes in your region, how how eminent do you think lockdowns are oncoming?
I think that most countries wouldn't want a lockdown in fear of having greater economic setbacks. They'll try as much as possible not to control people from moving around. They'll try to put in travel apps to track people. I think in many countries, say for example Vietnam, they already, as I mentioned earlier, they've stopped coffee shop places from operating. Gyms have also been told to close. So they are trying as much as possible to not go into a lockdown situation. But if push comes to shove, and a lot of cases are recurring, then I think they would definitely put it in lockdown. But I think that's the last thing that they want to do.
Okay, Pat and Kurt.
I'll start. I think that here in Niagara Falls, we are doing, Niagara Falls, New York is doing much better with hotel occupancy than Niagara Falls, Canada is. And I think the reason for that is, and we probably mentioned this on a previous recording, that the United States has a big population that can drive and get to Niagara Falls, New York. Whereas Niagara Falls, Canada has a very big city, Toronto, within driving distance, but that's about it. So the number of people that can access the markets are vastly different. And Niagara Falls, New York is enjoying that large population that can drive here, and the fact that it's an outdoor attraction. So people right now still are more comfortable traveling and vacationing where they could be outdoors. So I'll stop there on the micro Niagara Falls area, but I think generally speaking, the inter-country tourism is going to do quite well, probably in Canada as well as the United States, but certainly in the United States. But cross-border tourism seems to be probably another season away.
Yeah,
but I'll defer to Kurt on that. He's an expert in it.
Well, I recently interviewed Destination Niagara's president and CEO, and their marketing efforts have been geared toward the old-fashioned family station wagon vacation of years gone by. And his he's suggested that other places are doing things similarly. So I agree. As far as travel within the country, I think there's going to be an uptick relative to last year, because the folks that would be traveling outside of the country are now going to be traveling within the country. And the other element is based on the fact that we may be a little ahead of other countries. There is a little bit of a pent up desire to see family, to see friends, and to do some things. And I think we're going to start seeing that once again within the country this summer, particularly when schools let out at the high school level and at the elementary school level. So there are going to be a lot of station wagon trips, or SUV trips, or minivan trips. That's what people are preparing for.
All right, Martine?
Yes, so in Europe, the recovery phase has already started, and we expect the month ahead to be very, very booming and to record high peaks. And that's a good news, because in Europe, we can see that the third wave of the pandemic is slowly but surely decreasing. So there is a huge demand for domestic travel. So this is the first element that I would like to mention, because our EU tourism activities are supported by each country. So that's rather important to notice, that there is a huge demand for leisure tourism activities as well as cultural activities. Business on the books are quite already really, really high in Spain, in islands, for instance, in the Balearic Islands or in the Canary Islands. It's really already booming. So that's a very good sign. Same thing in Italy. We can see that we have a very good booking elements in hotels as well in Italy, such as agriturismi. So it's definitely a very good sign. We can see as well, and this is really important once again, as far as the rollout of the vaccination campaigns is very good in several countries. We have huge demand in Europe for coming from the US market and from the Chinese market. So we expect people coming, international tourists, to reach Europe, and more particularly France, Italy, and Spain. So we definitely, I'm really sorry for you, Justin, but we expect a very good summer season here in terms of tourism.
Well, I mean, it happens. I mean, it's just a spike, and hopefully things get better here.
And given our conversations about policy,
Also,
border reopenings, just vaccine rollouts and so forth, if representing the industry, whether from a practitioner, from an academic sense, if you were to interact with government officials, departments, what's some good advice you can parlay to them on policy implementation?
Personally, for me, I would feel that the vaccination program is good. Scientists have said that it's not 100%, but at least by vaccinating people, it prevents the spread of the virus. So by vaccinating more people, you actually prevent the entire virus from escalating and getting on to more people. So I'm truly supportive of the vaccination program. But once again, here in Asia, the problem is that many countries are at different stages of the vaccination. As mentioned, Singapore, Hong Kong, they have a good system program put in place, whereas in developing countries like Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, I mean, you don't even hear anything about the vaccination program. So it's challenging here in Asia.
Well, I can go because we've just been talking about this again, the policies in the United States and Canada. And I'm sorry we're neglecting Mexico, but Mexico also has a problem vaccinating its population. I'm just more conversant with the Canadian, and Canada does not have a manufacturing capability to manufacture the vaccine. So they don't have enough of it. Obviously, in the United States, we can manufacture a lot of the vaccine, so we now have more than enough of it. So I'm about to leave and go to a press conference, and I'm going to recommend that we figure out ways for the United States to vaccinate Canadians. And I'm going to offer two or three ideas. One of them is actually started in the western or the central part of the country, where North Dakota, the state of North Dakota in the United States, is vaccinating Canadian truck drivers that cross the border. We have an awful lot of trucks that go between the two countries because we're huge trading partners. So I'm going to recommend that we figure out how to do that in the states of New York and Michigan, where the most of the trucks cross. And I think it's in our best interest, actually, to vaccinate truck drivers from Canada that are going to be in the United States. We want them to be vaccinated.
Yeah, of course.
And that would move a little toward vaccinating a very small portion, but still a portion of the Canadian population. I'm also going to recommend that university students, Canadian university students that attend university or would like to attend university in the United States, that they be vaccinated when they cross the border and come here, so that they can actually cross-border education is a big thing here. So we don't want to lose that piece. And that also gets us toward vaccinating another little tiny piece of the Canadian population. But I don't think we're going to open the border back up between our two countries. I'm sure this is the same all over the world.
Yes.
Not going to be able to open the borders up until the people in the countries are comfortable, and they're not going to be comfortable until they're vaccinated, when they know that others are vaccinated. So somehow, some way, we've got to move the vaccination rate up so that we all feel comfortable we can start to travel again. From a policy perspective, that's actually what we are going to recommend to the two federal governments in the United States and Canada this week.
All right, and Martine?
Yes, so same thing. Here I would recommend, and this is very, very important to speed the vaccination campaign. Of course, it's already well put in place, but still towards a given population range, meaning senior people are the one who are the most vaccinated in EU. Most particularly in France, 80% of the senior, even more than that, 90% of the senior people in France are already vaccinated, and only 1/3 of the young people. So for instance, students, they are not vaccinated at all. So that's really a problem. So in order to ease the process and to encourage people to travel, we should probably move on the age group, the target, and target different age group in order to ease and to facilitate tourism within EU. I think that would be a major element here. As far as senior people, they have the time, they have the money to travel, but they could travel off season as well. So it would be important in order to encourage tourism within EU to change this target group and move towards younger people. So that would be very, very important.
All right, thank you. Now, to the group, I know this is only our second session, but we often talk about the performance of hotels in each of our regions and the hospitality industry. A big part of our tourism destinations are typically the smaller family-owned, you can call them mom and pop businesses that support the tourism industry in each of our areas. From your vantage points in your regions, how have they been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? Have they been, how have they been able to weather the storm per se? And also, what do you think their outlook is moving forward?
Maybe I can kickstart with Asia first. Right now, with the current situation and the spike in COVID, I think ADR and occupancy would definitely drop. This is also mandated by the government because they would like people to stay home and not go out or to have any staycations or do domestic traveling. However, I'll give an example, like in Singapore. Right now, we have got a lot of healthcare workers who have been reactivated to look into the current COVID situation. The hotels are trying to work with the government to provide a place where healthcare workers can, they do not need to go home and perhaps infect their families. They can perhaps go to a hotel, help the hotels with their occupancy, and perhaps get the economic spillover effect to help try to help the hotels in their occupancy. In terms of operating hotels right now or hotels that are being developed, I know that a lot of hotels here in Vietnam, they are slowing down their development because they know that they are not, if they're going to complete their renovations and open a hotel, they're not going to get any business at all. So what they're going to do right now is that they'll slow down their construction. They're not going to want to get the opening done too quickly. Perhaps even for restaurants, for restaurants within the hotel itself, maybe they'll just open one restaurant and cut back on operational costs. For example, do not have buffet breakfasts. Have it as a buffet by ordering from the menu itself. So I think a lot of hotels will be looking to all these measures to cut their costs as revenues are not coming in, so as to remain profitable and to sustain their business.
And Justin, outside of the hotel setting, how have you seen smaller businesses around the tourism destination? How have you seen them been affected by the pandemic? Closures?
Closures, suspension of businesses. I think right now the hardest hit would be the mom and pop restaurants, the small businesses, because they don't have deep pockets. They can't really weather the current storm that's coming. So a lot of them would maybe go into other forms of business. For example, like food delivery. In Vietnam, we heard that People are no longer coming to the city. They know that there's nothing here in the city for them. In Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, they are staying back in the hometowns, probably go back to their farms or to go into agriculture. At least that would help to sustain them over this period of time. Until the economy picks up again, then you'll start seeing people coming to the cities to try to find work.
All right, Pat and Kurt.
I think what's happening here is out of any difficult situation, sometimes there are opportunities that can be created. So I've seen where restaurants that didn't have takeout, for instance, have started takeout service so as to be able to maintain traffic. And when things do go back to normal, it may be an additional lane, as it were, that's been created for their business. So it could be a net bump. Having said that, there are some people that weren't able to pivot or adjust, and they clearly have been affected by that, as is the case with what Justin was saying. But I do think that those who do weather the storm, in theory, could come out on the other side stronger as a result.
And there has been some government support.
No question.
So especially last year, I'm not so sure that that is continuing to the extent that it needs to keep these small places open. So that remains to be seen. But last year, there was a lot of government support for small businesses. It was well done. It was rushed, but still well done. And that has really helped.
And that coupled with the pent-up desire to travel, at least now that the weather's starting to turn in most of our country, I think that the prospects for tourism domestically this summer look to be promising.
Right.
All right, and Martine?
Yes, this is good to hear. In Europe and more particularly in France, there is a huge financial support for SMEs and for hotel restaurants. We will close, and the percentage of restaurants which going to close, because that's the most important element here to look at. Because we have many, all our restaurants are mainly in France and in EU, small and very small enterprises. So this is why we need to look at once the financial support for. So for regarding hotels, same thing, but we do not expect much problem with hotels. Even if, once again, in EU, we have more independent hotels, the financial support was so enormous that, of course, some of them won't reopen, but it's going to be probably a very small percentage. So, so we'll see after this going to move on to the next stage, because we don't know yet how it's gonna look like in the hospitality and restaurant landscape. I had to tell you that there is we look at other countries in Europe and even in the UK, and we look at what's happening in Italy and in Spain, where restaurants are back to normal, not really normal because you can operate only outside. So this is an important element for us. If you have a terrace outside, you can welcome guests, whereas inside it's not possible yet. So there is a huge demand for gathering and for having fun again outside. So this is an interesting element, because the country who has already reopened their restaurants are performing super well. So this is a good sign for the rest of Europe, of course.
Well, the situations in each of our regions is definitely developing by the week, by the day, by the month. So, it's good to see advancements in certain areas in policy and reopening of travel. Some areas, obviously, like Justin mentioned, are turning into have their surges, but Definitely the next couple of weeks definitely will be telling how each region will progress and hopefully not take steps backwards in their reopening processes as things come back online. Well, I thank you everybody for joining us again for this Tourism Outlook session. Looking forward to revisiting the second quarter on our next session. Hopefully things have gotten better for each region
I
and
hope so
policies
too.
and policies are better in place. But thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.